Hey guys, how is everyone? We've got a couple of people on straight away. We're going to go into some flexibility work for handstands today. I've done literally no warm up. I'm just going to sit down and have a look at my straddle position first. And then I'm going to show you guys how I open up my straddle position, so straddle pancake. But we'll just do the normal and just shout out any questions as we go. Stick any comments down on anything. Obviously, if I can't answer it, I won't answer it. But let's see where I am with my straddle position first. So I'm just going to do just a standard seated straddle and run through some progressions towards it. It's obviously a stretch or position that if you get into handstands and the body weight stuff, that makes a massive difference if you can open this up a little bit. So this is where I'm at, cold, and it is cold today as well in Australia. So chin to the floor. So I'm just going to literally just sit there for a minute or two, just in this straddle position. Now the straddle is an interesting one. Obviously just spending time here using weights, doing repetitions like up and down, good morning positions, and things will slowly open it up. But you can also play around with isolating certain muscles and then coming back to the position and seeing how it affects it. And that's what I'm going to do a little bit of today and just show you how just doing like a hamstring stretch or calf stretch or something can massively change this position, but it's very individual. So some people will see a big difference by stretching, say, calves, and then they come back in this position, and then other people will see no difference. So it's worth playing around with it and seeing which way you can open yours up the quickest. If you are doing this stretch, if you can't get into that position with your low back, so see the angle of my low back is leaning in this direction. If it's the opposite, and this is where mine was when I started. So when I was 37, I couldn't sit in this position when I first started this. So you need to raise your hips up. So if my back is facing in this direction, so my spine is going backwards that way and not that way, then I need to raise up. So something like one of these mats from IKEA is really good because you can change the height of it. So if I go really high and then see what that does to my position. So now I can get much further forwards there and my back is definitely going in the right direction. If yours is still hard in that position and it's hard to stay there, you can bend the knees. So that's one way of making it slightly easier, or raise it even higher. Especially if you're going to spend long duration here. I often program this for people that are super tight and just recommend they sit in this position when they're watching TV and stuff. You just want to make sure that you've got an extra range or extra room for tightness there. So just raise up even higher if you're going to be there for a longer duration. So in that position. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stretch my calves and see if we can make a difference. But stick any questions down if you have any as we go. So I'm just going to do a standard calf stretch. Actually, let's just do it up against the wall. No, I won't do it up against the wall because you'll just have the back of me facing the camera. So I'm just going to go with standard calf stretch. I'm going to do both at the same time. So walk the feet as far back as I can, keeping the calves or the heels pushed into the floor. So that's quite a strong calf stretch for me. And then we'll just go back into that straddle seated position and see what effect it has on my pancake position. Now I can now with my pancake, because I use it quite often, I can basically sit in the position and if I push it relatively hard for about a minute or 2 minutes, I can get flat. So I get my belly button to the floor. And it is one of those positions that I'd recommend that you do visit on a daily basis, not necessarily smash in terms of stretching to the point you're sore, but I would visit it all the time because you do want that fully open for straddle, especially straddle presses and any other movements that we need that open straddle hip position. Okay, let's go back and test that pancake position now. So I won't sit on the mats. There's dog hair everywhere. Rosie's over there sleeping, if you can hear anyone snoring. Okay, I'll take the microphone off so I'm not squishing it. Okay, so we had chin down a second ago. So, okay, now I've got the belly button down. Now it could just be visiting that position for me, just because I am more comfortable there. Okay, so that only took a calf stretch and that's opened me up enough to go down a little bit further. Another one that really makes a difference for me, sorry if this is making the sound go funny, is a pigeon stretch. So I'll use the one I got from the Bodyweight Warrior, the twisted pigeon one. This makes a massive difference for my straddle seated position. So taking one leg over the other, so you're in that twisted position. So the way I teach that if I'm doing a class is I have people sit in a pike position. I take one foot over the other, bring the foot up as high as you can towards the hip, bend this bottom leg, so you're into that position. And then I'm going to take my left shoulder to my left knee, and then my right shoulder to my left ankle, and pull into that position. Now, for me, that's a really big glute stretch. So I just pull into that, and my right side is way tighter than my left. So this one really opens my pancake position up, and you'll see in a second. So I just do that like, what's that, 20, 30 seconds on the left side. This one's much tighter, so just swap the legs over. So a lot of people will get confused when they get into this position on what to do here. So if I've got my right leg on top, I'm going to take my right shoulder to my right knee and my left shoulder to my right ankle. So pull down into that position. And again, I'm just going to do 20, 30 seconds. Obviously, if you do more, you're going to get a bigger result. But I find that like 30 to 60 seconds gives me like 80 or 90% value. And then anything more just is a little bit on top. So time-wise, before you handstand or train, you want to warm up as quick as possible and get the maximum from the least amount of time. Okay, so then let's just go back and try that again one more time. So that should now mean that so now belly button is comfortably down. See, I'm more or less flat there now. So that would be, for me, that's a very super quick straddle warm up. I'll go into some more in a second as well. Okay, I got a handstand question from Jacob. I often get wrist pain short ways into handstand training. Is there a way to condition the wrist to avoid that, or a healing protocol or something? It could be flexibility. So flexibility is a big one, or conditioning. So if you're just not used to spending that much time on your hands, the big one will just be increasing that time, but not doing like 4 hours in one day, but just to slowly increase the volume depending on what you're doing. Also look at what you do daily. So if you're on a computer all day in flexion, and then suddenly you're going into extension and putting all your body weight onto there, that's going to be a shock to the system. So doing things like if you're on a desk, putting your fingers on the edge of the desk. So if you're like that and just sitting in that position when you're working and just making sure that you're stretching your wrist during the day, that can make a difference. Opening up your thoracic mobility, that's a massive one. So most people are too stuck, so they're too rounded in their upper back. So allowing yourself to be able to get more open in the shoulders, open in the upper back, then creates more space for your wrists. Taking the hands wider, because most people will go too close when they first start handstanding, closer than their flexibility allows. So then again, the wrist is just taking the brunt of it. They're the big ones. And then just watch your volume when you're doing your handstands, and look at your position when you're in the handstand to see whether it looks like you're putting a lot of demands on the wrist. So there's a few different things there, but if you like video yourself, have a look at your flexibility. I mean, you'll know what your flexibility is like already. If it can be improved, it will make a massive difference for your wrists. And I'd recommend trying to get up as often as possible on your hands, but watch the total volume per day. So I'm not a bigger fan of people just going to like once a week or something. I don't think that's enough. I would do 3 or 4 times a week still at minimum, but just watch the volume when you're doing it in terms of how much per session and slowly increase it. How do you get rid of the fear of doing handstands on high surfaces? Just build a real big circle of balance in terms of you never miss when you kick up to handstand. If you should be able to kick up 10 times in a row on the floor before you start going up to any height. So I haven't done Handstands, I've done some this morning, but I haven't done any like this afternoon now. It's like 4 p.m. here. So I'll show you what I mean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I catch this handstand now. I'm not warmed up probably. I haven't done any wrist warm up. I haven't done any shoulder. But I'm going to make sure I get into a handstand by going to my safe place. So go into underbalance, using a slight bend in the elbows. And notice my head is forward. So look, I've made sure I can catch the handstand there. Now, if I'd have tried to get into a real clean position with dead straight arms, I would have had to kick over to my handstand. So kick up to handstand going in this direction, and then I have to put the brakes on or be really good at catching the handstand. But instead, I went up into a handstand by bending the arms and then used a push here to push up into handstand. And because I'm staying more in this underbalance, I'm way more controlled. So if I'm going to do a handstand on the edge of something, so if it's a bit dodgy, I will go even more towards underbalance. So say I'm going to kick up onto this height. I'm going to make sure now when I go into my handstand, that I'm always going to stay this side of the handstand, not this side. So the way I do that is by bending the arms in that same manner. And then look, I'm now using strength to push up into my handstand in that position, as opposed to kicking over to it instead of going like this into handstand. So first of all, just be realistic on your positioning in terms of how well you can hold a handstand. Kick to something that you're comfortable with and make sure you can catch it 10 times in a row on the floor before you go higher. Yeah, and then I would just go, so if you're still worried about going higher, then I would just go slightly higher and then slightly higher again. So like going on, yoga block height to start with. So, stick your hands on yoga blocks, this type of height, then increase to this type of height, increase to boxes where, one of the big wooden boxes, like those ones where Rosie's on, just because that gives you a big surface area and you can walk around and then have a play with kicking over and, have confidence that you can land on your feet whenever you come out, and then just slowly increase the height. Okay, I'm going to go into a block push now. Now, this one I recommend everyone do if you're working your straddle position. So I'm just going to use a yoga block. You can use anything in front of you. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to push the block out. So if I go into my straddle position. So with straddle, one of the most common errors people do is they think they want to get their head to the floor. So they round and try and pull their head to the floor like that. So that encourages the back to round. What we want to think about is lengthening the spine when we go into straddle. Oh, excuse me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the block away. Now, I'm not going to put my hands down on the floor because I want to increase the strength and mobility there, not just the flexibility. So the strength through that range. So I come back up like that, go back down, again, not touching the floor. And then I'm going to push the block or lift the block, take it further away, come back up again, and then do the same thing. So down again, try and get that block further away. And you can see that's trying to lengthen my spine as I do it. This one is really good for people that are flexible, who can get flat in pancake, because you often see that they'll go down and then they won't be able to get back up. They'll have to use their hands to get back up. So increasing the strength through that range, through a smaller range of motion first and then slowly making it bigger, will be good for the flexible person. And if you're learning it like I did, where I was super tight, then you increase the strength as you go. So you sort of, once you've got your flexibility, you've got the strength. So that's a fantastic drill. Just checking if I missed any other questions. Okay, let's carry on with the straddle stuff, but I'll do like standard straddle or standing straddle. So just another standing straddle good morning position or a good morning exercise. So the one we just done was seated good morning. So I'm leaning back and forth, but in a seated position. Let's do the standard one. So I'm going to stand in this position. I'm going to take the hips backwards and then take the head down towards the floor. So you could go, if you're wearing a cap, you can see if you can get the cap to the floor Again, no hands. So a common one again is for people to hold onto their legs, pull themselves down, or place their hands down on the floor. What I want to do is be able to go up and down. So if I can get my head to the floor, no hands, and then show control all the way back up. Open the hip fully. So don't get stuck in this closed hip position. So open the hip and then do the same thing again. Now I could go nose to the floor and back up again. Now, obviously, I've opened and closed that straddle position first with the stretch in, and now this is a little bit more active. And then a good one to do, especially if you're going to go into some handstand work from here, is to come down to that bottom position, place the hands on the floor. Now, all my weight is backwards into my heels because my hips are pushed backwards. So my hands have got no weight in them. And then I'm going to push forwards, start to round and load the upper back, go up onto tiptoes, and then come back again. And then I could open all the way back up. So you can open and close with the hip, come up onto tiptoes, and back down. And that's another great warm up, but also increasing lots of flexibility for that straddle position. Is it true to be able to bench press your own weight is a good indicator that you have enough shoulder arm strength to practice handstands? Obviously, that's going to really help. I don't know what the numbers match up to. I come from a strength background, so I could comfortably do my body weight with even overhead press or with a barbell. I can do like 1 rep or close to 1 rep of my body weight. Maybe not now. I think my 1 rep max standing press is about 72 to 75 kilos when I last tested it. Depends if you call that a push press or a strict press. So I'm just under 80 kilos. So I'm nearly doing my body weight in a standing press, but I'm quite strong because I'm short. It makes it easier for me to press heavy weights. I don't think you need to be able to do it, but obviously that's going to help. It's not the only indicator. I would try and condition yourself. If you're just after like a balanced handstand, I would condition yourself with handstand exercises and then do some general weight training as well, just to build up some strength, especially if you're on the weaker side. But I wouldn't base it off body weight numbers and try and think that carries over. It's always interesting to see where people are at in terms of their handstand push-ups and stuff. But I recommend everyone does some sort of strength training if they're missing some. But I would go with like dips and push-ups, probably over bench press and using weights and machines. I think there's a lot more carryover with the body weight stuff, depending on what you're working towards. Okay, I'm going to rock into that straddle position a little bit more just to get a little bit of bottom of the press. So exactly the same position now. I'm going to bring the legs in a little bit closer. So the benefit of going a little bit closer with the legs now, you're not going to get your head so close to the floor, but as you go down, the hips will come up higher, relevant to your shoulders and your hands. So now when I come down, look, I can't get my head to the floor, but when I rock forwards, I can lift my feet up comfortably. So I've seesawed the hips up higher compared to the shoulder height. The hips go on top of the hands, and then I can lift my feet up. And then I just open up the hips all the way at the top. So I'm using that straddle position. I could even close, try and bring the legs to the arms and back again. Now, if you can't float here, if you can't get that hip on top of the hands, if you haven't got the strength to hold there yet, still go into that position, but just hold there for a few seconds, right on the tip of your tiptoe, ideally right up on top of your toenail there. If you're in that position, that's going to decrease the height of your hip by about that much. And that will make the difference between being able to go up, float, or just get lots and lots of weight out of your toes. There, you've probably got lots of weight back. We need to get as much weight into the upper back, shoulders, and hands as we can. So going right up onto the tiptoes will really help. So that all ties in that straddle pancake position, the straddle good mornings, the standing good mornings, the forward lean up onto the tiptoes. I have another question. I managed to get my palms to the floor, but I can't get lower. It feels like I've tried everything at this point. So you mean like a standing forward fold? So I'm assuming what that is, palms to the floor. So, so this position, palms to the floor. So people will either get stuck here or here commonly. So one thing to look at to see potential in terms of how deep you can go in a forward fold position is the gap between your torso. So if I'm in this position, see this gap between my torso and my legs? That's a massive difference. So if I can close this gap, see how deep I'm going now? So my head's pulling down closer to the floor. So now my torso is getting closer to my legs. I've still got some potential here because my chest isn't touching my legs. So I could get even further and even closer and deeper there. So that shows I can go deeper. So obviously, if we're training on the floor for that, then using something like a step really helps because that takes the floor further away from us. So if I'm in this position now, so we go down. Now, one of the things people will do when they go into a forward fold position is they will leave their hamstrings and their hips behind. So when they go over their legs, they basically leave things behind here. So imagine there's like string coming down behind you and it's left behind, so pulled down like that. Now I try and lean forwards. Now I can't get over. But if I grab hold of all this string and pull it up over my hip in that position, now when I come down, I'm not leaving anything behind and I can take that with me and that helps me lengthen down lower. Look, and then I can touch the floor here because I'm taking all this. So my Achilles, my calf, my hamstrings, my glutes, everything over the top. Well, that fascial line is then being stretched as much as possible, and that allows me to go deeper and deeper and deeper in that position. So we need to try and get some more range. So one of the things you could do is you could stretch your Achilles, your calves, your hamstrings separately, and then go into your forward fold. So that's going to make more space. You could play around with things. This is like magic, this one. The IKEA step works really well because it's got these holes in it and this ridge. But you could set something up separately using something else. But basically what we want to do is if you bend your knees in this position and then you grab hold of something, so I can put my fingers in the hole here, and then I'm going to straighten my legs, but try and pull down at the same time. And then I'm going to do the same, but I'm going to go lower because I've got a bit more range. So there. And try and hold down as I straighten my legs. Now you can see now, look, I can comfortably get my fingers. They're even starting to bend a little bit on the fingers now. So I've just lengthened that even more because I've really stretched all through the back of the legs, back of the calves, and that's pulled me down even further. So that one's really good. Using a weight as well. So doing Jefferson curls. So Jefferson curls are fantastic to load at your end range and also gets through your spine. So the spinal articulation, get all the parts of your spine moving, is really useful when you're trying to get deeper into a forward fold. And it's so good for handstands as well, for your entries, your presses. So I'd recommend you're using the Jefferson curl or something to mobilize your spine. The Jefferson curl is so good because it not only mobilizes the spine, but it gets into the hamstrings all at the same time. So this was the main thing I used to get comfortable. First of all, getting my fingers to the floor because I was really tight through there, then getting palms to the floor and then going beyond. Now, if you've never done it with a weight before, maybe start with like 10 kilos or something. So here, I'm going to keep soft knees. I'm going to take my chin to my chest, roll down through my upper back, through my mid back. Shush. Rosie. And I'm going through my spine. So still with soft knees. When I pass and I can feel that going to my low back now, I'm going to lock the knees backwards and then go as deep as I can there, holding the bar. Now I can do some little bounces at the bottom if I'm comfortable. And then I'm going to bend the knees on the way back up and go through the spine again. So the initial part is spinal articulation. And then as I get to the bottom, lock the knees backwards and then try and lengthen. And eventually you'll be lengthening through the low back as well. So they're probably the number two I would use, or the top two to lengthen like forward fold position. So Jefferson curl and that holding on to the box. Yeah. If you're super tight, so if anyone's watching who's super tight that can't get your like fingers to the floor type thing, and you can't get to 90 degrees at the hip. So this is really common if you're starting out in this. So if you can't get to that, so 90 degrees with a flat back, I recommend you isolate individually your hamstrings and use a post or a wall or a doorway to stretch that, because you don't want to involve the spine too much if you're that tight. So something like this wall works well, or a doorway. So if you imagine if this was a doorway, I can put my leg up here and then the other leg straight. So I go into this position. So here, now my spine's straight, this leg is straight, and then I can just lay down in this position. So if you're tight there, you could spend 10 minutes here and you'd be fine because your spine isn't compensating. And then all you do is you move closer and closer to the wall, or to what you put your leg up on. Make sure this leg's straight until you can get all the way to the wall, and then you've got that 90 degrees. Do both sides. That's like a nice, safe way, and that's a really good way if you do have any spinal issues. So if you've got like, if you had a disc bulge or anything like that. So that's a nice, safe one for hammies. I'm going to go into some splits now, I think will be good. But keep if there's any handstand related questions as well, we'll start doing some handstands as well. Yeah, and just give it time as well with the hamstrings. It depends on your age as well. Like the two ends of the spectrum. So if someone's like late teenager, early 20s even, your hamstrings can be really tight just from still growing. And then the later in life you are. So, you know, if you're 40s plus, you might find that you're just so stuck through there from years and years and years of having bent knee positions that it might take a while to get through there. So just give it time. Okay, let's look at split position. So what I'm going to do with the split is I'm going to do it separately. So I'm going to do my quad first, quad hip flexor, and then I'm going to go into hamstring, and then I'm going to put them together into split. So I'm just going to go into a lunge position. I'm going to bring this foot up, grab hold of that foot, bring it all the way up to the butt. And then I'm going to see if I can take the hip further forwards. So I'm going to wiggle this front foot further away and then pull down. So this is really winding up through the quad and then into the hip flexor as well, especially as I drive forwards there. I've just got to make sure that I'm not arching through my low back in any way. So I often do this one up against the wall as well because it keeps you honest. So a lot of people will struggle with this one, trying to get the heel to the butt because we tend to be very tight through that rec fem. And then trying to drive that hip down. So I can really feel that left hip flexor now. So I'm going to go there. And I'll swap over and do the other side. I'm going to do this quickly because I'm doing it more for demonstration, but also I can go quite quick to get into a relatively good split for me. Just because I do this so often. I'd probably do this once to twice a day, especially if I'm coaching. A bit of a hack if you are coaching people, just always join in the stretches when you're teaching. And that way you're going to get more and more visiting of positions, even if you're not stretching that hard. Make your body happy to be in those positions. Because eventually that's what we want in the handstand as well, is the body to be really happy to go into like splits and open hip positions, straddle for presses. So I do that for hip flexors, quads. Then I'm going to stay in this position, keep this hip on top of the back knee. Then all I'm going to do is lock out this front leg. So really hyperextend this knee backwards. So don't let that happen at all. So really lock that knee backwards. And then I'm going to take fingers to the floor. Now, a lot of people will struggle with that, so they won't be able to get fingers to the floor. If that's the case, just put your hands up on your shin and really focus on that knee being backwards. And that should give you a good hamstring calf. If you've got more flexibility, see if you can go down to palms on the floor. If you can get palms on the floor, then walk your hands forwards. If you can get to your foot, I'd recommend that you grab hold of your foot now and pull it back towards you. That's really going to get into the calf as well. And then just make sure that knee's locked backwards, and then reach in your head towards your toe. So it's going to get all of that chain through there. Then all we're going to do for the split is I'm going to look at increasing the distance between this knee and this heel. So you can either take the heel forwards or the knee backwards. Look, and then that's taking you towards your split there, however flexible you are in that position. And then you just do a hold there. And I'd do that, I'd recommend you do that at the start of whenever you train. So do the quads, hip flexors, hamstrings, then go into a little split hold, come back out, do the same thing on the other side, so the same setup. Make sure you lock this knee backwards, this hip on top of this knee. Try not to do this with the foot, don't let it go in or out. Try and keep it in line with that side. Lock the knee backwards, see if you can take fingers to the floor, palms to the floor, walk forwards. If you can walk forwards, grab hold of the foot, pull it backwards. And then all I'm going to do is increase that distance between the knee and the heel as far as I can that way. And it's going to take me towards my splits. And then you could argue, I don't know how long we've been online now. So I've been online half an hour now. So I've done hip flexors, quads, hamstrings, front splits now, seated straddle, good morning, Jefferson curl, calf stretch. And you could argue then if you just done a wrist stretch, maybe something for your thoracic. So let's just open up with the foam roller now. Now, if you've watched any of my content or come on live before, you know how much I love the opening up of the upper back. I think that made the biggest difference for me for my handstand in terms of getting into positions like tuck and also just being able to hold a straighter handstand position. So I'm using a foam roller. If you can, get the ones from Black Roll. They're really, really good. Just check if there's any more questions. Guys, keep sending any questions if you have any. I want to make it as much about you guys and helping you out as I can. Let's get the bar out of the way. If you're in Australia, check out, I get all my equipment from Flex Fitness. There's a link in my description. Their stuff's really good. So Black Roll for the rollers. So I'm going to have that mid-thoracic there. I'm going to bend the knees. So to start with, I'm just going to explore this position. So now I'm going to take my hands above my head, biceps by my ears, and then keeping the butt on the floor, keeping the abs on. I'm just going to extend as much as I can there and see how that feels. I'm opening up in towards that position. So just be careful here. So a lot of people, when they do that, they'll arch through their low back, they'll hyperextend their neck, or their arms will come apart. So that's all the body trying to escape from that position. So keep it quite tight, see how that feels. And then all I do is cup the head, lift the butt off the floor, and then roll over that area and just see how the spine feels. Then if that feels okay, add the arms in as well like we just had them. So biceps by the ears, and then slowly take the butt down towards the floor as well. All right, quick wrist prep. I've done a couple of handstands already, so I know I'm okay with the handstands. But let's just do some circles on the wrists. And then for the handstands, I'm just going to start off with just a general balance section. So it doesn't matter how good you think you are in the handstand. It's always good to go back and just practice a little bit of balance work to check you can do it whenever you need to, and be able to do it with the least amount of warm up as well is really good. Okay, wrists are nice and happy now. So I'm just going to kick up into some handstands. So what I'll do first, I'm going to kick up into do a heel pull. So let's move you guys over here. So I'm just going to kick up onto the wall now. I'm going to use this wall. I'm going to kick up and put my heels against the wall, and I'm just going to pull my heels off the wall using the fingertips. So if you're learning to handstand, this is probably your go-to for your first balance exercise. Obviously, we have the kick up first, so you need to be able to do a kick up to get to the wall. But just try and make that as controlled as possible. Put your hands on the floor, make a real strong base. Shoulders on top of the hands. Pick a focal point. So you're always looking at that focal point on the floor, and don't change it unless you intentionally change it for some reason, like you're trying a different setup. So my target is here to get my feet up to there. Careful I don't come down onto this rack. So hands are there. My focal point is somewhere between my index fingers. That's going to stay the same. I'm going to keep looking at that all the time. And I'm going to bring this leg up to touch the wall. So kick up, touch the wall, come back down again. So the shoulders are staying on top of the hands. Then I'm going to bring up the second leg. And then come back down again and just make sure I can do that one more time. And then I'm in that position. Now, obviously, if you already got that comfortably, you don't need to go through those reps. But if you want to improve on it, just make sure you can do those really slowly and controlled. And then from this position, I'm just going to push through the fingers to handstand, relax the fingers, fall back to the wall. Push through the fingers and back again. So one of the big things you'll notice there is that my body was leaning against the wall. And then when I came off the wall, I stood up into a handstand and I went back again. So a lot of people, when they first start doing the wall drills, is they pull themselves off the wall like this, and then they fall that way because they've dragged themselves off the wall. What I want to think about is if we're leaning against the wall, so if I'm going to do this to stand in, I'm not going to pull myself like this off the wall. As soon as my head comes off, I'm going to stand tall and stop in the handstand. Then I'm going to go back again. So the movement isn't that way. It's up to handstand and then relax back again. And that increases your balance towards the overbalance. So from where your hands are to where the wall is, you're increasing that range of motion. Doing too much talking. And then what we can do is we can just make that bigger. So how do we make it bigger? Is I'm just going to take the hands further away. So instead of having the hands here now, I'm going to move them as far as this rack allows me to do. I'm just going to go to here. So now when I come off the wall, it's going to be harder to come off the wall. So I'm going to have to pull off the wall and then up. But I'm going to have to drag myself a little bit more to get myself on top of my hands and then push up to handstand. So if I go right on the edge of the rack where it is there, so now I'm going to drag myself a little bit off the wall. As soon as my heels come off, then I push up into my handstand. So I'm pushing towards the ceiling, and then I relax the fingers and I go back again. So it's worth testing that, even if you're doing some freestanding holds. Check you can do that with control. Check you can do it and both feet come off the wall at the same time. Take you out of the dark. Okay, let's have a look. Do you recommend to learn to kick into handstand or with 2 feet together? Most people will be able to kick into handstand easier than they can to jump into handstand. Occasionally, you'll get someone who finds it easier to jump into. I would practice both with priority on the kick up, just because it's easier to break down. There's less jump, so less control. Or sorry, more control in the kick up. There's less control in the jump. So it's easier to fine tune when you're first learning. Because what you got to remember is when you go to handstand, you've got a tiny window of balance to land into. I've made my window of balance very big, so I can kick up into any type of handstand and catch it. But when you're first learning, it's tiny. So you want the least amount of variables. So normally the kick up will give you that. One of the good things with the jump is that it sends you up into handstand instead of over. So that can help. But I recommend you start with the kick ups, see how you go with them, and then add some jumps later on and do it that way. Question about shoulder and pelvis position in one-arm handstand. I notice a lot of difference in shoulder internal external rotation between different people in one-arm handstand. So the biggest difference you'll notice in a one-arm handstand is normally the distance people are from their head to their shoulder. So normally the the better someone's flexibility and their stacking and their like positioning the one arm, the closer their shoulder will be to their hand. So you'll see people that are very comfortable in a one arm or very flexible, they'll be in this position, and this will stay the same all the time. When they're not so, they're more strong in the one arm handstand, but unless like stacked with perfection, you'll see people away and they'll be balancing like this, and you might see some internal, external rotation as they're trying to deal with the rotation that happens. Like if I do a one arm handstand now, you'll see where my shoulder is without doing lots of warm up for one arm. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the right hand, straddle across, have the shoulder and head as close to they can be to each other, and then hold there. And you see now that why I tried to catch that because I started to lose it. I went like this and it came away. There's going to be some rotation in the shoulder there to try and bring it back. But the thing I think about is just the push and the bring it back together. So it's like the pec and the lat and everything pulls in to pull you back again. And as you go out, you'll turn away and you'll come back again. So I never think about internal, external rotation in a handstand. I think about pushing, pulling back in on the one arm handstand. So it's a bit complex. It's a bit like people over-analyzing what's happening in the hips in the two-arm handstand. Once you get a good two-arm handstand, you sort of forget it. And you don't really need to think about those things. It's putting too many layers to like over-analyzing in a way. Yeah, and also you'll see, so you'll get people that there's basically two styles of handstands. So there's people that have more of a bigger anterior tilt and they really stick the butt out in their handstands. So their whole positioning will look completely different than someone that doesn't do it. I come from being more very tight throughout the body. So my position looks very different than someone who's more naturally flexible. So that's normally where I think you see the differences between body types in terms of like their overall flexibility throughout the body, and then the way they stack it. That's what I see the most. If you look at my old videos of my one arm handstand, I used to balance the one arm handstand looking in the middle. So like if I was on canes and doing one arm handstands, I'd still be looking down in the middle. Where now I done some work with Daniel Lidard, and he tidied up my position on my one arm and got me looking more down my arm to my hand. So now when I'm on canes, I still look at this hand. When I look on the floor, if I'm doing a one arm on the floor, I'm still looking at this hand. Where a while ago I was looking in the middle. So that's why my handstand looks a bit like this, even when I'm on one arm, instead of this. So ideally it would be this, because that just cleans it up and there's less moving parts. So I hope that makes sense. It all depends where the biggest thing with two arm handstands as well, but you see it more in one arm handstands, is you need to find your position, and everyone's is slightly different. Because there's so many variables that sort of come out when you do a one arm. There's less places to hide. I find it harder and more exhausting to do it with 2 feet instead of the kick, but many people say that 2 feet is better long term. Yeah, I mean, I think I probably kick up more than I do jump up. It depends what you're doing. You'll get a lot of circus performers, a lot of yogis will do the two-legged entry to handstand. But it's more just to fits in with their practice. If you're a hand balancer and you're using canes, you're doing elevated handstands, you'll tend to jump up more. And if you've got really good forward fold flexibility and you can stack really well, you'd probably jump up more. I've had quite a few people that press into handstand once they can press, and they start to press into handstand all the time. And it tends to be because their consistency of their catch is better with a two-legged entry than a single leg entry. The downside of that, because if I say I'm doing one arm handstands, and every time I want to do a one arm handstand, I press into handstand, that's just used up a lot of energy before I go into my one arm. That's used up energy, as opposed to if I kick into handstand, that's used no energy. So the press there probably used for me double, triple the energy. So if I'm doing 15 sets or 15 reps of one arm handstands, I've got to do 15 presses. So my consistency of catch might be better, but my energy expenditure is way higher because of that. So it is really down to the individual. There's not a right or wrong way. I would find, if I'm coaching someone, I try and find the best way that fits their goals and their current level. I'm flexible in my straddle and also can do L-sit, but still can't get my L-sit to handstand. So assuming you mean straddle L-sit to handstand. So that's really common if that's the case. You gotta see whether it's a strength thing or whether it's a active flexibility. One of the easiest ways to do it is to raise the hands up and see if you can do a stool to press with the hands raised up. That will tell you whether you've got the strength to do it or whether it's a flexibility issue or active flexibility. So if I do this, put my hands on the box, so here, and then I go into a straddle position, so with bent knees, and then push up. See, I can get up and I can go back down again. So I'm basically using strength to go into the straddle press there. That tells me that if I can't do it on the floor, it's a active flexibility or a flexibility thing for a range of motion. So all I would do is practice for your stool to press, so your straddle L-sit to handstand, is really slow eccentrics. With the hands raised up very, very slightly off the floor if you need to, and then separate them if you need to. So do your straddle press, eccentrics, and then come to the floor and then walk your feet through to your straddle L-sit. So like separate the movement. I can't breathe now after talk at the same time after doing that demo. Did I work on flexibility with Daniel or technique? For me, it was just technique. What that really done as well, and I recommend that everyone has a coach in some way, because it made me do the things that I should be doing as opposed to just doing the things that I like doing. So my training has always been like that. Like I get really into the stuff that I'm into and like put the other stuff in the background and just do just enough. Even though like I started when I back in 2013, I started training with Ido Portel. And even then, like he would give you a very detailed program to do. I would do the stuff that I liked the most, and I would do more of that and less of the stuff that I didn't like. And I think most people train like that. And then what tended to happen, obviously, was that I got very good at the stuff I liked. The stuff that I was putting on the back burner and not doing so much of, obviously got worse and worse. And then it would restrict me from achieving something. So when I felt that, then I went back and worked on the stuff that I should have been working on. And the coach, especially the way having someone like when I was working with Daniel, that made me have accountability. So when he would tell me what to do in terms of what to work on session to session. And then it forced me to do it because I knew I had to show up and show him what I'd been working on. So for me, it was more the accountability of doing those things, like doing enough reps and sets of having the head in the right position, holding and doing my time on fingertips. Even though I knew if I went like this, I could lift my hand up and do a 10-second one arm, knowing that I had to go like this and put one finger, forced me to do it from repetition point of view. So for me, it was that. It was just the practice, the consistency of doing that, doing the things that I didn't want to do, which sort of helped me. But still, my one-arm handstand isn't great because I don't prioritize anymore. I like having a one-arm handstand, and I can do a right one-arm handstand 99% of the time. My left still needs a good warm-up to get a 10-second hold plus. But I'm sort of happy with that, so I don't practice or overly practice my one-arm handstand training. It's sort of where I want it at the moment because I'm more keen on working on other skills. So I'm more like playing with more the strength stuff and trying to advance that from a training point of view. How do you keep yourself motivated to learn the skills? I only learn the skills that I really want to learn. So I think that's the big thing. So I only go for the stuff that's priority for me, what I like. That's actually the reason I stopped training with Ido, because he wanted me to do so many other things. And, I wanted to pursue certain things, and he wanted me to move on to other things because he said these things were good enough. But in my eyes, the things that I really enjoyed wasn't where I wanted to take them. I wanted to take them even further. So that's why I decided to stop working. The main reason I stopped working with Ido was because I wanted to go with these things and didn't like this other stuff that he wanted me to work on. So in terms of how I keep myself motivated, I only work on the skills that I enjoy. And that's why now, like my coaching, I basically just coach the handstand balance, the strength skills, and the mobility that I personally train, because that's what I'm passionate about. So that's why I feel that I've got my expertise in from practicing it for years, and I attract people that want a handstand push-up or a press handstand or one-arm handstand and things. So, but if someone comes to me and says, I want to do an iron cross, I can't teach that because I've never practiced it, and I don't believe in training that, so I don't teach it. So that's what I think everyone should do. They should find their thing and practice that. Now, obviously, there's certain things that you will need to get the skill you want. So, like the reason I started working on my flexibility was terrible, was because I wanted to press handstand. So I had to get a certain amount of flexibility. I've grown to now love flexibility work. So now that's actually one of the main things I really enjoy. But I started to do the flexibility work because I wanted to press. I needed that. So that sort of kept me motivated for that. I am practicing the one-arm handstand and straight bar handstand with kick on powerlets. Any crucial tips? Obviously, the one-arm handstand and a straight bar handstand are very different. With the straight bar handstand, I would allow yourself to be have bent arms and catch in this position, and start on a very low bar to the floor. And get very comfortable. So, but what in terms of bent arms, I mean more holding like an underbalanced position. Let me show you. I haven't practiced these for a while, so this will be interesting. So if I try and hold a two-arm handstand on here, so straight bar handstand, I'm going to try and kick up first to an underbalanced position. So I'm going to bend my arms slightly, and then I'm just going to use that movement, like riding a motorbike, to see if I can catch the handstand. You'll see my head will be forwards and my elbows will be bent, and I'm going to banana the handstand. Ooh. So I'm using strength there. So I'm letting my body banana over. I'm not trying to be dead straight. And then when I catch the handstand, I'm going to go up on top of it. So it's not going to be, I'm not sure if I'm going to get it with no warm-up. But let me try to show you the bent arm position. No, I'm not going to get it, I don't think. No, I need to warm that up. But that's the idea. So you'd be bent arms, and then let yourself banana over. Once you've got your balance, then fine-tune it. Very small movement in the wrists, and then straighten the body on top. How would you recommend learning to catch a handstand push-up? Every time I push up, my feet move, my body, and I overbalance. So if you overbalance, or if you're always going up, so understanding with a handstand push-up, understanding how to use the underbalance when you come down, and then the overbalance as you come back up to help push you out of that position is really important. And that's the difference between getting a handstand push-up and not getting a handstand push-up in terms of catching it. Because when you get down to the bottom, I'm in that position, so there's underbalance. And then when you come back out, overbalance pulls you out up to the handstand. But most people then will keep going too far, and then they'll fall out towards overbalance. So you'll see two places you'll fail the handstand push-up. It's at the bottom. I'm not sure. I've done so many handstand push-ups yesterday. This will be a good test. You're testing me today with one arms and single bar balance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down towards underbalance and go too far towards underbalance. So as I come down, this happens, and then I can't push back out because I've made my body go too far down that way. So with the handstand push-up, you've got to come that way to take your chest towards the floor because you're stronger with your chest towards the floor. You don't want to come down like this. You want to come down in front. but knowing that you don't go too far. So you go too far towards underbalance that way, and then going back towards overbalance at the top. So if I'm here, I go towards underbalance, my feet go backwards, head touches, look at my feet go over towards overbalance. That helps me get back out, but then I have to time the shoulders coming back and the feet coming back at the same time so they stack as you come up, because you're going that way and then you need to pull back there. So it's like you snake up. So working out the timing of that is really important. The easiest way to do it is to get strong enough so you can slow the last bit down as you get close to the top. So you basically get to the top of the handstand push-up, wherever it is, so it might be there, and then you go like that speed to finish the handstand and hold it. Most people are using momentum from the overbalance to get them out of the handstand push-up, and then they'll keep falling towards the overbalance. If they're getting stuck at the bottom and your feet are falling to the floor, then you're falling towards the underbalance. So it's slowing it down enough at the top is probably the easiest way to understand that. When you said your flexibility is terrible, when I know I do not have any flexibility. Yeah, but when I started, so I'm 46, I'm actually 47 next month. So I started at 37, and I couldn't sit in a straddle, I could just touch my toes. My flexibility was not great. So everyone can get way more flexible if they're consistent. That's the biggest thing with the flexibility. So sitting in the evenings instead of sitting on the couch watching TV, sit in a stretch that's comfortable-ish, and your body will slowly open up into the positions. That's what I done. And it took like 18 months or so to make a biggish difference where it unlocked. It took me about 18 months to get my first press. And that was when I could then get the palms to the floor, forward fold position. I think I got my head, nose to the floor in pancake in about 18 months. And then around 2 years, sort of got chin to the floor. And then the last sort of 6 or 7 years has been adding on top of that. Okay, we're at 57 minutes now, guys. I was going to plan to do an hour, so if they let me know if there's any other questions. Okay, how do you kick up into a straight handstand? When I do chest to wall, I can posterior pelvic tilt and hold a decent line. When I kick to a freestanding, though, I find it really hard to tense up and my legs move around like crazy. Yeah, so that's the tricky part, because obviously against the wall, we'll position ourselves into a handstand and get into the best possible position. And even to do like the heel pull and toe pull drills off the wall, you're in that perfect handstand position, and then you pull into a handstand. So it's like you're in a straight line and you pull off into a handstand. You do that back to wall and chest to wall. So I recommend you do that if you're not doing that already. Practice chest to wall toe pulls and then back to wall heel pulls. So you're pulling on and off the wall. So let me just demo those really quickly now, because you might be doing them, but someone else, if you can't do them, you should be doing them, because these are like bread and butter of a balanced handstand. So kicking up this way, pulling off with the fingers to your handstand and going back again. So if you're trying freestanding handstand and can't catch, and you can't do this one, you should definitely be doing this as a priority. And then this way around, so chest to wall, pulling off. So using the shoulders to pull off and go into that position, and then slowly push up to handstand and then push back again. So being able to do both of those is really, really important to learn to handstand. So then you have that balance window to kick into. Because what I've done there is I've strengthened the handstand that way, I've strengthened the handstand that way, which increases the balance window. So then when you kick up into the middle, and I would recommend that you're not trying to be too straight when you first kick to handstand. So if I kick to handstand here, I would kick up, if I'm learning, like this. Here, got my balance. Now I push up into a better handstand, whatever that looks like. When you're first starting, it might be here. And I would do this instead of trying to get to this, because this is much harder to balance. Once you've got consistent 10-second plus handstand, then try and straighten it a little bit more. But be realistic in terms of what mobility you have and things like that. So most people try and kick up to a 2 straight at a handstand when they're first learning, and that's what's stopping them handstand. How would you recommend to start flexibility training? I've got some free YouTube videos. It depends what level you're at already. But I've got some follow along, like beginner handstand ones. I've got follow along handstand flexibility, like a warm up one that I give to a majority of my online clients as well. I just use that as a follow along. What I do in that video and what I teach in my classes is nearly the same every time. So do a quad stretch, hamstring stretch, glute stretch, thoracic foam rolling, maybe a hang as well, shoulder stretch and some fingertip, some wrist prep, and then handstand. So basic, like really, really basic stuff over and over again. But obviously you need to work out whether you need like single leg hamstring stretches or double like forward fold position. Depends how tight you are. If you're super tight, you probably should be working single leg hamstring first. I definitely do single leg quad hip flexor anyway. But have a look at my YouTube. You'll find videos there. If you can't find them, message me and I'll direct you in the right direction. I've just done a paid. I'm going to start doing some longer, more in depth paid ones on my website. Just like half an hour, 45-minute videos that I got all the details on like how to train for certain things. And I've put one on there that is a beginner handstand one that goes through stretches and how to handstand. That's a really good one that would be great just to follow along and do. And would cover most people. That's basically what I teach in my handstand classes. How long did it take you to do a handstand push-up? If you could only recommend one shoulder exercise for it, which one would it be? Knowing you have a good handstand. Chest to wall handstand push-ups would be my go-to. If someone's not strong enough to do a chest to wall handstand push-up, like sliding the toes down it, I would do a pike handstand push-up. You want to be working around that 3 to 5 repetition range. If you can't get 3 to 5 reps, you need to go down to an easier variation, and then always like flirt with the progression that's slightly higher than that. Once you can do that, if you can hold a freestanding handstand and work on eccentrics, so ideally to a deficit, so you go down to a shoulder stand position, and then add on top of that partial range handstand push-ups. So there's a little bit of gray area there in terms of giving you one exact exercise because it really depends on what level you're at. I done a video, I don't know, about a month ago now on my YouTube where I went through all those progressions and done a session. That's a free one on my YouTube. Check that one out. That will give you the information you need. And then you just need to assess yourself and see where you can do the number of repetitions. So that 3 to 5 is that sweet spot. Think about like any other strength exercise. Like if you was doing deadlifts or something, you wouldn't just do 1 reps. You would just hang out in 5 reps most of the time. So like a 5x5 or something would make you strong. So something like handstand push-ups, I would do the same. Hello, Paul. I've advocated for you so hard to be on Fitness FAQ's podcast. I love your Instagram and YouTube workout tips, man. That's funny you should say that. I'm going to be on I'm doing the Fitness FAQ podcast on Thursday this week. So I'm going to be on there. But thank you for that. Yeah, it'd be great for you and your growth. Very big following there. Could you explain to me which handstand press would be better for a beginner, tuck, straddle, or pike? Any of those. So that's the tricky one with the press handstands. So basically depends on your flexibility and your strength. So the first handstand press that I got, you could call it a straddle, but it was because of my flexibility and my control on the handstand, it looked like, I'll see if I can demo what it was like. It was like a planched pike press. So I went forwards like with my feet about there. I went forwards like this, really planched, and then went up like that. That would be the technique of my first press handstand. So, it's a hybrid between a straddle and a pike. It had bendy knees as well, so you couldn't really call it a pike. So it's probably a hybrid between all of them. Someone who has very good forward fold position, so someone who's very flexible, who can get into a really deep position there, they often can get their hips so far over their hands that for them, going into a pike press would be easier. Now, in terms of numbers, most people will tend to be able to do some sort of straddle, bent leg straddle one. And that's probably the easiest one to learn for most people, which is like that version. So it takes the least amount of strength and least amount of flexibility. So it sort of meets in the middle somewhere. So a straddle one is, especially if you just have soft knees and don't demand so much flexibility, is probably the easiest one to learn. With doing back to wall drills, doing partial range reps, it makes more sense doing the straddle one. So I'd probably, for most people, straddle press handstand would be the way to go. It's great. Any other questions, guys? We're hit the 1 minute, 1 hour 5. I'm going to need a rest after this. I'm just talking and training. Does anyone want me to demo anything else? You can put me on the test, see what I can demo coldish. Oh, awesome. Yeah, thank you, Dev. That is you. Yeah, no, I know Daniel anyway. I helped him out when he was doing some one-arm stuff some time ago. Can I do one-arm press to handstand? I don't know if you call it a one-arm press to handstand. I can show you what I can do without warming up my one arm so much. It's not technically I wouldn't call it a press, really. I mean, even though there's not much kick in it. And I don't know if I'm going to get it. So this is what I can do in terms of one-arm entry to handstand. So I'll go into that position, then I'll lift this leg up. You might see me kick off this foot a little bit, so especially without warming it up too much. I'll see if I can get into some sort of one-arm. Nearly. Yeah, that's going to be about. So I can get up like tidier versions of that. So some people would call that, especially if you have no sort of kick off that foot, they would call it a one-arm press. Someone that can do like a one-arm stalder off canes or something like that position and press up would say that wasn't a one-arm press, I'm sure. But that's like my show-off move. It's a little bit easier on canes because I can pull, not canes, on yoga handstand blocks, because I can pull myself into it and my catch is bigger. I lost where I was. Okay. I've been training tuck press, and when I try to do the movement in the end of it, I feel pain in my arms. So if you're getting pain in the arms in a tuck press in the end of it, do you mean at the top of the handstand or the bottom? So because there's what you got to remember is with a tuck press or like a planche press to handstand, what your scapula has to do, because you're in a like a planche position like this, and then you have to change your scapular position like dramatically to get into this overhead position, and then you have to come back down again on the eccentric and get back to protraction again. It can be quite clunky for the shoulder blades to work out what to do. So that's a common one that can cause a bit of discomfort through there. What I would do is, obviously, if you have pain, you should get checked by someone in person. But I always recommend that people, if they're doing press work, that you also do like front lever pulls and skin the cats, that type of thing. So this type of movement. And just notice how easy this is for me. And if you struggle with this and are trying to do your presses, so you see how easy this movement is in a tuck. So I recommend that you build the strength there, because if you look at it, it's very similar in terms of going from this position to this position. It's not identical, obviously, because that's a pulling movement and we do a pushing movement, but I recommend that you do that's combined with the press handstand work, because that makes a massive difference. And hopefully should make your shoulders a bit happier, and just make sure you're not dropping through the shoulder blades. I wouldn't do a tuck press to handstand unless you can do a tuck planche, because that's obviously like a prerequisite to having good scapular strength and conditioning. So how do you know if you're ready for that? What was we talking about there? In terms of the press handstand, if you're ready for it. So I would still work press handstands. I would get good jumps. So straddle jumps, tuck jump, pike jump. Pick the one that you want to work on. So if you want to straddle press to handstand, become really good at a straddle jump to handstand, and then start to turn the volume down or turn the speed down on the jump, so it starts to look more like a press. And that way you can start to condition and get the pathway, and then start to do the wall drills in terms of the eccentrics. So if I'm going to do a straddle, I don't know what the best angle is. So if I'm going to do a jump here, shoulders on top of the hips, I bend the knees, jump through the straddle into handstand, come down relatively slowly, kiss the toes to the floor, and then I can start to go up slower. So I'm still using some momentum. And I'd recommend that anyone who wants to press starts to play with those as a bolt on to their balance work. So balance work still needs to be priority. And then you add on some press work on top that could start with jumps. And then I would start with like wall leans, taking the shoulders on and off the wall, and then add in some eccentrics on the wall. And I would not do chest to wall presses. I'd do back to wall. That's an interesting one lately. There's been a few people that are saying that the chest to wall is much better than the back to wall. I disagree. I think the back to wall is the best press handstand drill. The people that can do really good chest to wall press handstands can do a press handstand, because there's a point where your feet come off the wall in a chest to wall straddle drill. And most people have a gap between where their feet come off the wall and hit the floor. If you can do a press, you can do that last bit and go down and touch. If you can't do a press, you just drop. So you have this section that you don't train. So it's not a bad drill, but I would prefer most people to do back to wall, because normally people can get all the way down, touch the toes to the floor. Do you incorporate elbow corrections in one-arm handstand, or do you try to avoid them as they are less pretty? Do you think about it when handstanding? I in terms of one-arm handstand, I think a lot about my elbows, especially on my left side, on my weaker side, because what tends to happen is I pop out here. So I consciously think, bring the elbow in while I'm in that position to try and keep this in. And for me, consciously thinking about the elbow tends to fix that and help me. And that's what I'm continuously thinking about on my left side. On my right, because I can do this in my one arm, because it's from all those presses and jump to one arm and stuff that I've been practicing stupidly for years, doing lots and lots of reps of those. I've got very good at moving myself around there, not even thinking about what I'm doing with my elbow and my shoulder, but there is corrections in the elbow for sure. What do you consider to be harder, straight or bent arm press to handstand? For me, straight. Bent arm was relatively easy for me. I've always been strong with bent arm pressing though. So I was, always really strong with dumbbell presses, overhead presses and stuff. That's what I used to always do in the gym. I used to do lots and lots of that and less pulling work. So my bent arm strength was much stronger. But now, because of my flexibility and the amount of like straddle presses I've done over the years now, straddle presses, I can do that first thing in the morning cold, no problem, like 5 to 10 reps, just because I've got in that sweet spot for doing it. So now it's probably about the same. I probably need a bit more warm up actually for bent arm now. So that's sort of not answered the question well, but what motivates you? I just love handstand training, variations of it. And then any of the, like, I love the calisthenics stuff on the bars and stuff as well. I don't do any of the dynamic stuff just because I'm terrible at it. And I'm also conscious that I'll probably get hurt myself if I try and do any of the fancy stuff on the bar. Where I just love the handstand stuff. Or just, yeah, that's what motivates me the most. I would always come out here and train. It's my go-to. I love it. Please do your favorite handstand shape. Oh, what's my favorite handstand shape? I actually think visually I really like the look of the half straddle one arm position with the hand up in the air. I probably don't do it that much anymore because I need to warm it up because it's, let me see if I can do it. It's a big ask though. Now I shouldn't have said this one. I should have picked an easier one. But visually that's what I prefer is this position. So there, and then lift this other hand up there. So that's probably my favorite looking one. It looks really cool on high canes as well, just like that up position. I was pretty pleased with that hold as well, considering. Once you have unlocked a skill, how often do you continue to train it without losing it, or can you always come back to it? Because I coach, and I'm a secret show off as well, so I'm quite shy in person. But when I'm doing a handstand class or workshop, I'll over demonstrate things. And the way I teach my online clients as well, I like doing videos as well. So I'll maintain the skill, especially skills that I'm not training that often, by coaching. So, if I teach ring strength, because I don't do that much ring strength work anymore, but if I'm teaching a client to do a muscle up or a ring routine or something, I'll just over demo that. And I'll do a YouTube video on muscle ups, and then I'll go through all the progressions, and that will keep me in check on doing it. And if it feels hard, then it will motivate me to go, okay, I need to work on that skill again, and I'll put it back in and do a bit more of it. And one that's been hard for me is that I had one arm eccentric chins on both arms, quite comfortable. I managed to do them the other day. I surprised myself and could do both sides because I was filming it for a client. But that was something that felt harder than it should be. So I do want to get back into the one arm chin work to make sure I can do that, because I felt I was losing it a little bit. But that's the big thing, is coaching keeps me on track with not losing the skills, some sort of maintenance in that way. Hey, how do you get more activation and control in the hands in handstand? One arm handstand. You should start. You could do it as well. You should definitely start working some one arm drills, because one arms really gets you to think about the thumb and finger as well. It's a lot more work here. Where two arm handstand, you can basically just rock between the palm. With a one arm handstand, it really gets you working on the finger, thumb and finger, and using blocks as well. The blocks drills will really get your hands really active. And with your flexibility and your press strength and your just overall handstand capacity, you would be fine with those. So I look forward to seeing some one arms from you. Okay, thanks. What I meant is that when I stop pushing to lift myself up, I feel pain in my arms. Also happens when I get close to failure in a tuck planche. Can be a strength problem. Yeah, I would strengthen and work on your mobility of your scapula. So doing like scapular active passive hangs, scap pull-ups, your scapular push-ups and things like that. Make the mobility and the condition of the scapula really well. Because that's like the foundation. It's like having a crappy core and then putting big muscles on top of that. So like training on machines and stuff that don't strengthen all the smaller muscles, and then you put big muscles on top. So you can do that with the scapula. You can have a scapula that's not, it can be winging still, and then you add some strength on top of it, and then it will give you some discomfort. So that's probably what's going on there. That's perfect. Look, and then we got this question: how do you train more scapular elevation in a handstand? Do one arms. It's the same answer. Block climbing on handstand blocks, doing the block climbing. So walking down onto one hand and walking back up again, that will really get your scapula firing and shoulders and stuff. Tucks can really help as well. Tuck is, but your tuck is awesome. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But yeah, for anyone else, tuck handstands is great for scapula and getting your traps and everything working. So asking about straddle press to handstand. What was that one? Yeah, back to wall for the straddle press. I think that's what you mean. Guys, I'm going to have to go in a minute. I promised my wife an hour and it's been an hour 20. Looks pretty cool. Yeah, that half straddle was awesome. You can practice half straddle in two arm as well. You don't have to do one arm for half straddle. It's basically just straddle, shoulder width apart. Yuval Alion has an amazing half straddle position. I've got a photo somewhere with me and him doing them. Thank you. Yeah, I love like the control in terms of what I like to teach is the transitions between the positions as well. So sort of always having control, whether you're in a funky position, whether you're in between a shape or a skill, and having really good control there. That's what I enjoy training and filling those gaps on clients. I have very tight hip flexors and hamstrings. Could you show exercise if it bumps me to L-sit to handstand? If you watch the start, if you wasn't on at the start of this video, watch the live again. I went through the flexibility that I use, the Jefferson curls, the holding onto the box and extending. They're really good pike ones to get your deep forward fold. And then if you've got tight hip flexors, doing the quad stretch and then going deeper into a lunge position. I meant two-arm handstand. Yeah, I know you meant two-arm handstand. That's why I was laughing. The one-arm handstand, it will give you that for your two-arm. So start to play with those. You could do some one hand on the floor, one hand on something else, and then do that. So have one hand elevate, even on the yoga block. Have one hand on the yoga block, one hand on the floor. Okay, but I struggle to keep my bum on the wall when doing the eccentric straddle press handstands. I know how the hip position should be, but should I push through the shoulders more to avoid it? If you watch, it's like I'm advertising my YouTube channel, but I've got a back to wall. Just search Paul Twyman back to wall press handstand, and it should come up. It was about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, I done a video of the two different variations of back to wall press handstand drills. You just need to make sure that you're progressing to the second one when you're ready to, and that will show you how to go through the butt, the low back, the mid back, the upper back. First rolling through all of the body, pushing the shoulders against the wall, and then the harder variation where you just put the butt on the wall, then the low back, then the mid back, then the upper back. Are you into handstand push-ups? No, I'm not doing this. I demoed a couple of handstand push-ups earlier, but I'm not doing any more today. I've done so many handstand push-ups yesterday with overhead presses, so I'm sore. Thank you. Yeah, check back and just watch that back through. I'm going to be putting a lot more mobility content up. I'm motivated to get my mobility deeper at the moment. Yeah, you won't see half naked body from me in my YouTube clips, that's for sure. I'm way too old for that. Okay, guys, I'm going to call it. It's 1 minute, 1 hour, 23 minutes. Thank you guys for joining me. I always enjoy doing the lives. A lot more content coming. You can obviously send me questions and stuff and let me know any requests for videos and things. Reach out if you'd like coaching. I'm always trying to update my website and things, so www.paultwyman.com.au. I've put a 15% off any of my online coaching as well. So it's in the description of this live and pinned at the top. So yeah, reach out if you need a hand or anything. And don't forget, if you're in the UK as well, it's not long away now, August the 13th. I'm doing 2 workshops, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. like a beginner handstand or beginner to intermediate balance session in the morning, and then in the afternoon doing some strength skills. It would be good if you could come make it to one or both of those. I'll speak to you soon. Cheers, guys.